everyone, it's Paul Ward here, and welcome to another edition of Farm Talk. I'm so excited today because we have Alex Frecker with Frecker Farms in Carpinteria, California. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. Happy to be here.
This show is brought to you by Escrow Hub and the Money Store. So what is Frecker Farms?
So Frecker Farms is a certified organic row crop farm located in Carpinteria, California. We're 40 acres and very diversified. We grow avocados is the only tree crop that we grow, but everything else is diversified row crops. So kind of whatever you would assume to see at a fresh market, we probably grow.
I understand that you have been a farmer since a very young age.
Yeah.
You started at, I think, 25?
Yeah, I started this business when I was 25, and then before that had quite a bit of experience working for a family friend who became a mentor of mine since I was like 13, doing farmers markets and whatnot.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
because usually you think of farmers as, in
Older.
their 50s, 60s.
Yeah, it's a problem in the country right now. I think the average farmer is like 62, I think I want to say.
Really?
And so that's going to be a thing that we'll have to deal with in the next generation, pretty much.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you had a passion for it since you were a teenager.
Yeah, it was more like proximity, I'd say, first off, and it was a good, job that helped me buy my first car and gave me some autonomy. And then after that, it did become a passion. It was really fun. I think my first exposure was being able to sell produce at farmers markets and just realizing what a community-based job it was. It just felt like it was important, and people had a lot of interest in it and wanted to support it, and it felt good.
And you had a mentor who got you started?
Yeah, John Givens. I actually knew the family from playing roller hockey in Santa Barbara, ironically enough, and after that, took a job with him working at the Santa Barbara Farmers Market every Saturday, which was great, with his youngest son, and it just kind of went from there. Yeah.
And then, so you started and you had like a 3-acre parcel to begin, and then tell us about that.
So yeah, it was right up here on the other side of that hill, Rincon Road, and it was actually four acres, and it was just me first, and it was pretty crazy for a couple years. But I was ambitious and was able to get into the Pacific Palisades Farmers Market, which is a farmers market that I was selling at for John previously. So I already had clientele there that knew me, so that was helpful. And the rest is history. Started getting part-time employees, hired some friends, and started honing in on Spanish a lot more, which I realized was going to be important. And
now, would you pay your friends in beer and say, hey, come host some
I don't
weeds?
even think I had enough money for that at that point. I think it was more just whoever wanted to come work, get a nice workout out at the farm. But no, eventually, once we were able to start selling at farmers markets, we generated some income and just kind of went from there. And it was meager means, but, hard work pays off.
And then you grew fairly quickly. I mean, you kind of grew from 3 acres or 4 acres to 30 plus acres quite rapidly.
Yeah. The transition, I think the first 2 years we were at 4 acres. And then after that, we rented some property out here, an additional 11 acres. And there was other tenants on the property farming simultaneously. And since then, we just started acquiring those acres. And so now we rent the whole property. We have been renting the whole property since, I think, 2018. And it's working out nice.
Yeah. And I imagine with that expansion, you had to get a lot of new equipment because, growing on 3 acres is a lot different than growing on 30 plus acres.
Yeah, constant. And learning how to do things differently. So it went from kind of hand techniques, and we still do a lot of stuff by hand out here, but in order to scale, you have to mechanize. And so we definitely learned how to get the right tools and how to use them properly. And we're still in that phase. Definitely always acquiring and learning for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now you're certified organic.
Correct.
What made you, I mean, for some people that's an easy answer, but what made you decide to go organic versus conventional?
Part of it was proximity. I think that if I grew up in Ohio and met another John Givens in Ohio who farmed, not organically, conventionally, I I imagine that I would probably be doing that there. I think that's part of it. But then as I learned what it meant to be growing organically, there's a lot of pride in that, and it's something that I've wanted to sustain. So yeah, we got certified right off the bat. We actually got certified organic before we started growing.
You did?
Yep.
You didn't have to wait the kind of 3-year
So
phase
the
in?
property that we started on had no agricultural record. So there was no spraying that occurred on the property. So in that scenario, you're actually able to convert that property to organic right away. You just have to have an initial inspection.
Sure.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
we were lucky. I was hoping to find a property like that, but also felt pretty lucky to have that experience.
And I would imagine being organic, you've got a pretty loyal following.
For sure, yeah,
Client
absolutely.
base,
Yes.
customer base?
Yes, definitely. And, you know, the conversation grows around that concept, the fact that we are organic, the fact that we are using compost, that we're trying to build soil and really create a healthy environment, definitely helps retain customers. And also, again, it's a piece of pride.
Right.
Yeah.
Your soil's not dead. It's
No,
it's
it's
living.
quite different. Yeah, if you dig around in the soil, you'll find all kinds of critters for sure. Yeah.
Your mission, fresh, organic, local. What does that mean?
It kind of encompasses what our goal is here. We do a mix of wholesale and retail. So we do a lot of direct marketing through our farmers markets. We also have our farm stand, which is happening today. We've done produce CSA boxes for our community here and communities in Los Angeles. And even though the business is a mix of wholesale and retail, it's all trying to aim at local. So our produce isn't traveling much farther than Los Angeles or the Bay Area.
The Bay Area's pretty far. It's 400 miles.
Yeah, but in the scheme of farming, not very far. I mean, a lot of farms are shipping out of state, out of country. And so we keep it relatively local in that sense. And then it also helps us build community. So the fact that we have a strong foothold in the local community and actually local communities, you know, through our farmers markets that are between here and Los Angeles, I feel like we're able to kind of generate these little communal hubs of, you know, transactions of organic produce, but also thoughts, you know, concerns, considerations, and it's good.
I went, speaking of local, I went to you had a dinner here at the farm.
Yeah.
It was kind of a family style with a long table, and there
Yeah.
must have been, 50 people on each side of the table.
For
and
sure.
string of lights and, everything grown here most everything I think was grown here
Yeah.
on the farm. And of course the organic beer garden too, which is nice.
Yeah, man, community is everything. It's definitely a goal of ours here, and it's been fun to kind of be that hub for people. And those dinners were fantastic, and I miss doing them, and I'm looking forward to doing them again soon.
Yeah, now that we're kind of out of the COVID zone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it seems like California is going to be opening up next week, which is great,
Yeah.
and we'll definitely be having some parties out here shortly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us more about the farmers markets. So you've got a crew that drives around to,
Yep. Yeah, it takes
kind of
a
dedication.
crew of people. It takes a fleet of vehicles. It's definitely production, but it's a system. So you get it systematic, just like we do with the farm and the
Right.
growing process. We have our core group of employees that go to these markets, and the main goal is just to represent the farm as well as we can, and again to really go into these communities with the mindset of creating community. So I always let our employees know that it's not just about the produce, it's about
Right.
the connection, it's about a story.
Right.
That's all part of it. And so we try to tailor towards that. And I'm really proud of the group that we have that are helping us out with those farmers markets.
That's awesome. What are you growing here? I know you got avocados. I
Yeah.
see avocados.
Yep, we have 2.5 acres of avocados between this orchard here and the orchard at my house. And then it's row crops. So diversified, about 40 different varieties of things year round.
Oh, wow.
So right now, like tomatoes are just starting, cucumbers, zucchini, eggplant, chilies, bell peppers, and then strawberries are one of our main commodities that we grow, which is kind of just getting to the tail end of the season right now. And then there's things that we grow year round, like carrots, kale, radishes, dill, cilantro, parsley, chard, arugula. I'm not even going to hit them all, but there's a lot.
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
And you have boxes that people can buy.
Sure, yeah.
And
so, yeah, we did that through the pandemic. So that was one thing that that was really unique about having a business like we have, which is, somewhat robust, but definitely still nimble and flexible enough to make changes when the world changes.
Right.
And we saw a lot of that this last year. So we were able to pivot in different ways that allowed us to still sell produce because we were an essential business, but also really to cater to our communities and do things in a safe, really conscious way. And so the boxes were a part of that. We were able to bring produce boxes down to Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles twice a week for a majority of the pandemic, and that is now tapered down to a once a week activity that we do on Thursdays from 3 to 5. And it still is a hit. It still is something that the community really desires down there.
Right.
But again, as things kind of morphed, as things do, in the states opening up a little bit more, we're again going to pivot a little bit. So we'll have that still available for people, and then we'll, do a more robust setup at farmers markets and continue on our wholesale and sell back to restaurants. That was a part of the business that depleted during this last year. Right, of course. Yeah. And so, it's not a huge part of our local retail, but it's again something that really helps us kind of be meshed in the community. And so I like being able to sell to local restaurants. And so that's starting up again, which is really nice to see.
And how do you, with the diversified crops that you have, I'm just thinking about, when I go into the grocery store, it used to be when I was a kid, blueberries were there for 2 weeks and it was some kind of specialty.
Sure.
My grandmother would buy blueberries, but my mom, couldn't afford them.
Right.
Now, blueberries all year long.
Everywhere.
You don't know where they're from.
Yeah,
unless you read the fine print.
Right.
So you don't know really what you're eating.
Right.
But how does that work with your client base, because you don't always have avocados?
Sure.
You don't always have,
and it's a problem. That's part of the personal problem of selling directly to people, right? Is you kind of have to answer to these questions. So we try to be transparent. I think that's also the beautiful thing about having these direct marketing strategies is that you have the opportunity to be transparent. You have the opportunity to educate. It's a little bit of work. It's not always fun. Sometimes you're not having a great day. Someone asks a stupid question. You're kind of pissed.
Right.
It's part of it. You got to tamp it back and remember that they don't know the side that you know of the situation, and you educate.
Right.
So that's what I do. If we don't have carrots, we had a string of about 4 weeks this last winter where we didn't have carrots. Never happened to us before. It was just the planting dates happened, so it rained in certain times where we weren't able to get into the field.
Right.
So we have that hole in that product. Just got to explain to people. It wasn't fun. It didn't feel good, but it was part of the process.
And your employees, they need to know the ins and outs as well.
So that's part of my job is, if I'm being quarterback here, I have to really be clear at communicating with all the employees that go out and represent us at farmers markets. And then also the back end, which is the backbone of this whole business, is our crew here. That's constantly picking, planting, weeding, all the different jobs that we have to do here every day.
It seems like, and just from touring, it seems like your employees are more than just employees. It seems like there's kind of a family camaraderie that you don't see in a lot of, bigger kind of monoculture operations.
Yeah, that's, again, something that we're trying to cultivate for sure. It's the same way I think about our small town of Carpinteria. It creates accountability. So if everyone's on the same page and the communication's clear, accountability is there as well. And I think that's helpful for raising people up and raising a business up.
Yeah, they just seemed enthusiastic because they were getting ready to, get in the van and go to the farmers market this morning. They were just kind of like, ho hum.
No.
Gung-ho,
we always check in with each other and make sure everyone's doing well. And sometimes someone comes to work and they're not feeling great, and that's understandable. And we do our best to help support them.
Sure. How are you? We're kind of in a multi-year drought. It seems like we're below normal every year now with rain. People have wells and, pumping water out of the ground. How are you conserving water?
So yeah, that's a good question. We also have 2 wells. I would argue that if you did want to do, if you wanted to go out and row crop farm like we do, especially in California, you really do need a well source to use city water. And I have some friends that do it. It's really tough right now with the rates
Very
that they
expensive.
pay, and also just a less responsible use of that resource. And not to knock anyone that's doing it. Sometimes that's the scenario. Sometimes there isn't an ability to drill a well, whether it's financial or because of the topography of the terrain. But we have 2 wells, and so we get to utilize those, which is great. And then we also have this feature that's back in the distance there. It's a 5-acre man-made reservoir.
Oh, wow.
So this property, topographically, we're at the bottom of the Carpinteria Valley basin right here. And so it's actually, watershed, or it's 500 acres of watershed comes to this location when it's really raining. So that man-made reservoir was created to make this land usable. Otherwise, I've seen pictures of this property in the 60s where it was a lake, the whole thing.
Oh,
And
really?
so pretty much half the property is unable to be used all of a sudden.
Oh, wow.
So we get to use that water when it does rain, that fills up, and then that percolates
Down in
into
the
the
aquifer.
soil, into the aquifer. So we're able to collect all that water while simultaneously cleaning it. Soil's the best filter around.
Right.
So that's pretty unique. And then in terms of how we grow, we use micro drip sprinklers.
Oh, you
so
do? You're not using rainbirds and watering all over the place?
We do when we're trying to get soil prepped for planting, but in terms of irrigation, we only use micro drip.
Oh, wow.
And so what that does is it allows for less evaporation. It allows for better penetration of water, so we have the water on for less amount of time but get a better saturation rate. And it only waters exactly where we want it to water, so we have less weeds. The only issue is the fact that there's a byproduct, which is plastic, petroleum. So,
Sure.
and we can only use those so many times. So there is a negative, aspect to it. But I'm hoping that in the future we figure out ways to have recyclable or biodegradable plastics. We actually had a team from UCSB come by the other week that wanted to ask questions and interface with a farmer to kind of figure out how they can get their minds around this problem, which is trash.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And I imagine with the mulches that you're using too, that the soil stays moist
100%,
longer than
absolutely. So yeah, it has better water retention. You get more even waterings, and you actually get the increased benefit of raising the soil temperatures up a bit, which makes the microbiology that's in the soil react and act a little faster, which helps the plant grow more robustly during the summer months.
Sure. How did the farm get started?
I worked for John Givens doing farmers markets when I was in high school. And then I went off to UC Irvine to go to college. And I actually would commute from UC Irvine to Pacific Palisades every Sunday to meet John's wife at the market, to do the market with her. So that was a great summertime job. And then after that, I was in my last year of college. I had a business management degree. I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. And I remember going and meeting John and his wife at their house for dinner. And I really wanted to ask John if I could work full time for him. And there just wasn't a good opportunity. The whole dinner, everyone was talking. I wanted to get him alone so I could ask him this. I was really nervous. And at the end of the night, I left because the night was over.
Sure.
And thankfully, John walked out with me, kind of behind me out the front door. And it was a perfect opportunity. So I asked him if I could work full time. He said, of course. And so I came and worked for John for 4 years.
And where is his farm?
In Goleta.
Okay, so
Yeah,
not too far.
so not
from
too
there.
far, about 20 miles away.
Yeah.
And it's a 200-acre certified organic farm
big.
between Goleta and Buellton. It had, at the time, it had 12 or 13 satellite properties. So
wow.
very big farm. A lot of inefficiencies in having all those multiple properties,
Sure.
but a need for tons of equipment, people, transportation, all those different things. So it was really exciting. There was so much going on. And in those 4 years, I learned Spanish. I learned how to do all the accounting and the paperwork in the office. I created his Good Organic Practices program, which is something that we all had to do at that point. I learned how to manage a crew. I learned how to grow fruits and vegetables. And
It's right, because you didn't go to school for agriculture.
none.
You didn't go
It
to
was
a big
all
farm
experiential, all of it.
Interesting.
So I had a mind for business and management, and some resources to put those into practice, but had no experience outside of just working on the farm, which I honestly would argue, in retrospect, is a really positive thing. I think for me, I learned so much better while doing and making
Sure.
mistakes and
Yep.
figuring it out as we go. But at the end of those 4 years, I was ready to do more. And I approached John when I thought it was a appropriate time, sometime after work. And, I told him that I was ready to do more, and said, if you could pay me a salary, I'd run your farm for you. And you could take more time off or manage me from a distance so you don't have to be here as often. And I should have known John better, but that farm's his baby. That farm is, like a child. He's just like he's cultivated the crops. He was cultivating this business, and he enjoyed it and he needed it. And he told me that he knew that if I wanted what I wanted in life, I'd have to go and do this on my own, which at the time was devastating. I thought I was going to just get a raise and kind of work a little harder and figure things out. He's going to go on vacation. Everything's hunky-dory. And so it just caught me off guard. And I remember going out to his son's house, who lived on the property, his oldest son, Matt, and pretty much probably just like crying and just feeling really down. And like I shouldn't have asked him that. Like maybe I should have just let things be. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe I angered him. And then as a couple days went on, I realized I had a decision to make. And it was either stay or let myself get pushed out of the nest and try to figure things out on my own. And that's what I ended up doing. And looking back in retrospect, it was the best decision. And John telling me no, and that I needed to go off and do this on my own, was the best thing he could have done for me.
Everything happens for a reason, right?
Yeah, but with motivation, with a goal in mind,
Sure.
So he definitely, that's the funny thing, is that as I went off on my own, I remember there was a bit of spite, there's a bit of anger that was kind of the fuel that I was using to get things working, because God forbid I went out on my own and didn't solve the problems I needed to solve, you know? And as I realized that I was capable and that things could happen the way I wanted to, that thankfully dissolved. And we're great friends. He's still a huge part of my life, a big mentor of mine. I call him with any kind of questions, and he calls me with questions too.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
It feels good.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so for those that don't know, what is the process for growing a crop?
We do pretty much everything in-house, which I think is kind of rare for a farm our size.
You do the seeds?
We
You
do
really
seeding.
germinate the
Yep,
seeds?
we germinate seeds.
Really?
We seed them by hand into flats.
Wow.
We propagate them, and then when they're at the right point, maturation, we transplant them. So it's the whole thing. It's literally from seed to harvest to procuring the harvest to selling the harvest, which I would argue, in a small diversified business, that's a huge power in our business, is to have this vertical integration of going from a seed product to a finished product that we're actually selling at retail value.
Wow. So you take the seeds out of the tomatoes at some point, and then you...
Well, we don't do all that. So that's
Okay.
so pardon me. So it's not a completely closed loop, which is fantastic. People that do that, and we've tried that before in the past, saving seed and whatnot. So you have to have seed that is like an heirloom variety, so that it can actually produce the same genetic components in the next set of offspring. When we use hybridized seed, if you were to use that seed of that product, you would get different phenotypes from the actual seed that you planted. So you'd either get something that's more related to the mother genetics or the father genetics.
Oh, interesting.
So you could do that, but you would get slightly different harvests every time.
So you'd kind of wonder what you're going to get.
100%. But after a little bit of time, you could select, it's Mendelian genetics basically. You can select aspects of fruit that you really like, keep using that seed, and eventually you will be able to stabilize those genetics. So it's a process,
Yeah.
but that's something I would love to do in the future. It's something that's not super related to the production side of things, which is what we're doing here.
Sure.
But in terms of like my own like tinkering mind, I would love to have
Right.
a little laboratory where
Sure.
we're looking at genetics, growing things specifically in the ground and knowing that this is a different phenotype from that phenotype and kind of seeing the variation that occurs.
Interesting, but it'd be kind of hard to monetize that when you're just kind of
It would be, we're already like,
so busy.
yeah, just drowning right now in work, especially in June.
Right, I
It would
get it.
just, it would not be something that works out, but it definitely tickles my fancy.
Sure.
Yeah.
What's it like relying on farmers markets? I mean, it's kind of different every day.
That's a great question. It is different every day, and it definitely goes through its cycles. So like right now we have strawberries, which is one of our all-star products. You go to the market, the first thing you smell is fresh strawberries coming off the table. And so times are good right now. And we have a lot of diversity in the field and a lot of diversity on the table. Conversely, in the wintertime, you could have a rainy market, which now you're out there wet, everyone's not feeling very good, the vibe's low. That's a big part of farmers markets is the transaction in terms of energy too. So if our employees or myself are at a market and we're freezing cold and we're soaking wet and water's dripping on everything, it's just not going to be very fun.
Right.
You can imagine everyone's trying to get in, get out, and move on with their day.
Right.
Conversely, you go to a market and it's 75 degrees and there's music playing and you can smell everything's so aromatic because it's warm out. It's just the ingredients for a potentially great market. So
Are farmers markets, are they competitive or collaborative? I mean, if everybody has strawberries, then
that's
is
another
that-
great question. It's both. And part of the market management's job is to manage that. So you don't want to be putting, like, for instance, if you had 4 strawberry growers in a market, you don't want to put the 4 strawberry growers right next to each other.
Right.
You want to spread them out throughout the market. And then markets are different. Like, we just started a market in Ojai on Thursdays. It's the Ojai Community Market, and it had its first market last Thursday. And it's all organic vendors.
Oh, wow.
So no one that's there is growing conventional produce, which that's the first market that we've joined that has that kind of like standard of what they want to be, selling at a marketplace.
Interesting. So the customer can just go in knowing automatically that, hey, anything I buy here is
Right.
organic. I don't have to even worry
Correct.
about
Well,
it or ask.
and legally, on our end, liability-wise, you are supposed to have things posted. So we're supposed to post our organic certification. We're supposed to post our signage. But that's exactly right, and that's pretty cool. I've never been involved in a market like that before, so it's exciting.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So farmers markets during the week. Tuesday, Santa Barbara downtown. Wednesday, we have our farm stand, and we're also in Larchmont on Wednesdays. Thursdays, we're in Carpinteria locally, Ojai, and then we also do our Pacific Palisades box drop-off. Saturdays, we're in Calabasas and also downtown Santa Barbara again. Sundays, we're again in Ojai, Melrose, Larchmont, Pacific Palisades, and Brentwood.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
That's
so
a big
I think
schedule.
13 market places a week.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So this has been Farm Talk. Thank you so much for checking in. Our sponsors are Escrow Hub and The Money Store. And you can find Farm Talk with Paul Ward on Audible, Apple iPlay, Amazon, and of course YouTube.